I'd love to introduce Aileen now. Dr. Aileen Lapierre is the creator of NeuroAffective Touch. She is a clinician, artist, author, and teacher, and was former faculty for 10 years in the somatic doctoral program at Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. Aileen is also the president of the United States Association of Body Psychotherapy and editor-in-chief of the International Body Psychotherapy Journal. Aileen co-authored the best-selling book, Healing Developmental Trauma: How Trauma Affects Self-Regulation, Self-Image, and the Capacity for Relationship, which is available in 15 languages. She also contributed to the new book just out this year called Somatic Oriented Therapies. Aileen is a graduate of Pacifica Graduate Institute and the New Center for Psychoanalysis. Alongside her psychotherapy training, she has trained extensively in body work, including somatic experiencing, postural integration, craniosacral therapy, Reichian therapies, body dynamics analysis, Emily Conrad's continuum, EMDR, and body-mind centering, all of which has enabled her to pioneer the integration of body work and psychotherapy, which is no small matter. I was fortunate to take her hybrid foundation training last year. And during our touch immersion, I read a post online by the spiritual artist Alex Gray, who's well known for these sort of psychedelic looking illustrations of the human body and mothers and babies, couples, these really exquisite illustrations. And he wrote, "Be an artist of consciousness," in that post, and I thought that's exactly what Aileen is teaching us to be. She's helping us learn to literally touch into the life force beneath the surface of our personalities, in our bodies and in our hearts, and giving us access to that force within that can reshape consciousness, allowing us to heal early trauma and experience post-trauma growth. And I think there's nowhere in the world that is not needed right now. So I'm so pleased to introduce her to you. Here's Aileen.
Thank you, Jen. You have such a beautiful way with words. When I listen to you, I go, is that really me? Wonderful. Thank you. So welcome, everyone. And I'm going to do my best today to explain neuroaffective touch. A lot of people ask me, how do I talk about it? I know what it feels like. I know the experience, but it's really hard to put into words. And truthfully, sometimes I run into the same issue. And we've been trying, Jen has been helping me and also students to find words that really talk about what is that integration between the energetic body, the physical body, the emotional body, the cognitive self, and the spiritual aspect. And so hopefully I'll be able to at least convey a little bit of it to all of you. What I want to do is start with a somatic contemplation, which really is an active dialogue with the body that helps restore the connection between body and mind. And it's a gentle embodiment practice. We use it a lot in the training, particularly when introducing a new area of the body or a new aspect of our energetic self. And it really helps us get to know ourselves in new ways, because there's a lot of ways in which we really don't know or, don't know how body and mind are collaborative together. And in this culture, and maybe in all cultures, there's a sense that the mind and the brain are the ones who have the intelligence, and the body somehow is some substrate that supports that conscious intelligence. But actually, what I try to convey is that the body is equally intelligent to the mind, if not even more, and that it carries and remembers every aspect of our lives and is waiting for mind to turn towards the body in order to tell its story. And that piece of inviting the body to tell its story is very much what neuroaffective touch is about. But it's not just that the body tells its story, is that the mind receives it in a collaborative, loving, non-judgmental way. So this little somatic contemplation is going to be just a, a, a touch in on how touch can be helpful in bringing mind and body together. So what I would suggest, it's like you're fine wherever you are, but make sure that you're seated in a way that's comfortable and as stress-free as possible. This is just going to be 5 minutes or so, so we're not going into a very long process. And as you sit, just sense your sit bones, how you're landing on your seat in the chair, because that is our grounding. And we, of course, ground a lot through our feet, but when we're seated, we ground through our pelvis. So allowing yourself to feel that surface on which you're sitting. And I am going to bring your attention to your breath. Now, breath is always tricky because whenever we do that, we have this sense of I have to breathe deeply or whatever. But what I would like you to do right now is pay attention to your breath and just identify a place where you can feel yourself breathing in your body. And take one hand and place your hand on that area where you feel that just that gentle expansion, retraction that is the breath. And place one hand there on that plate, on that area where you feel your breath, closing your eyes and sensing within yourself and also in your hand the gentle movement of your breath. It doesn't have to be big. You don't have to change it. It's not about counting breaths. It's about being with that gentle movement. And as you are bringing presence to that area of your body, let yourself scan a little bit. How are your body and mind receiving the awareness of that gentle movement? Perhaps you become aware of areas that are holding or bracing that might appreciate a little bit of letting go in order to participate in the movement of breath. And the second part of our exercise is with your other hand is find a place where you don't sense yourself breathe, a place where there is no movement of breath. We all have them, whether it's our neck, shoulders, belly, wherever. Just place your other hand on an area where you don't feel the breath and hold both at once at the same time together. No need to do anything, but notice what's happening in your mind as a result. It might be, and it's not about forcing the place that doesn't have breath to breathe. It's about simply holding it at the same time that we hold our breath also, because both are always going on within ourselves. and notice what happens just as you cradle both of these areas at the same time. And how is it for mind to be witnessing this event that is happening in your body? And how is it for your body to be in an experience that is being witnessed by the mind? Mhm. And now you can take a minute or two and simply experiment with placing your hands on different areas of your body, noticing, is it an area where breath is reaching? Is it an area that where breath doesn't quite reach yet and could have support in order for breath to find its way to it? And simply staying with that question, is breath here? Is breath not happening here? That's the first stage of connecting body and mind together, is witnessing just what is there. And as we close this very short contemplation, and if it feels appropriate, you can invite body to let mind know how it is to be witnessed, and let body know how it is to be in an open, receptive state to the body's experience. And let's come back. Open your eyes. I would usually ask for feedback, but our time is very short. So hopefully that gave you just a little taste of that process of bringing body and mind together and of beginning to take that particular kind of awareness into very specific areas of the body, which is what we do in neuroaffective touch, and how the touch itself actually helps us focus on bringing the two together. And so I see the touch as this kind of unifier that brings the inside part to awareness as well as connecting from the outside in. So a lot of people ask me, shifting gears a little bit here. A lot of people ask me, how did neuroaffective touch start? How did you come to do this? And so I thought I would share with you the very beginning of my process. And I came to this work not through, well, of course, I did a lot of studies, but initially the work came through imagery. And I'm going to share right now the very first paintings I ever did when I was 15, 16 years old that actually started me on the process that has ended up in the neuroaffective touch as it is today. Jen, are my images showing?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. So really, I think of neuroaffective touch as initiating what I call an emergent healing process. We are inviting. We're not, top down is like we bring insight, we bring analysis, we bring interpretation, we bring talking about events, but working with touch and working with the body, we invite. We invite the body to come forth, and oftentimes that invitation comes through imagery, comes through sensation, comes through hearing words. Anyway, that invitation process. Now, I did not know that when I started painting, but obviously that process took hold in me. So, this is the first painting I ever did. And I think I was 15 or 16, and I was just a sad, sad girl, wondering what is the meaning of life? Why does it hurt so much? And for some reason, I picked up, or somebody, or I had, in my room, a little box of watercolors and paintbrush. And I painted this painting. And if you notice, I knew nothing about art at the time, but the image was so clear in my mind, I thought, what if I tried to paint it? And what it is, if you notice at the bottom here, it's a woman picking up a very wounded bird. And that motion of picking up the bird and not just leaving it there to die, but that picking up, and of course, I didn't know at the time what the bird would mean, what the process, but the image brought me to it. And now looking back, it's like, oh, I picked up the bird. I was picking up the bird. Hence, then, already from the very beginning, this idea that touch was a key piece to begin entering the wounded parts of ourselves. And then I got interested in the imagery started to continued. So then I thought, I feel like I'm encased. I feel like I'm frozen. And so then I began just painting those sensory images, those sensory experience that I was having, not really knowing what I was doing. And then I also felt like my mind is watching my body, but it doesn't feel connected. And so you can see how, in a very sort of innocent way, I was making my way to understanding mind and body psychology. But I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that it felt good to do these paintings. And at about that time, and what was it? This was in the 70s, by the way, a long time ago. I heard about the Women's Building, and the Women's Building was in Los Angeles. That's what brought me to Los Angeles. And it was the first ever community of women artists who were getting together to explore what it was to be a woman and to be doing art. And so then my process then joined the process of many other women who I found out were also very psychologically moved into the art process. The Women's Building, by the way, was in Los Angeles on Spring Street, and it was an old warehouse that women had rented, and it was a very exciting time. So then a more conscious process of with art started. But what I could see in these paintings, and if you notice, of course, that woundedness is there. You can see it show up. But also what I was noticing is that everything was leaning as though it was going to fall over on that right side. And I was like, why is everything leaning? Why and so I became curious, and I realized that what was showing up on the canvas was an energetic organization within myself, where there literally was a collapse happening in my body, and that woundedness was part of that. So I began working with my body, and that's when I discovered the work of Emily Conrad at Continuum. That sense that if that the body has a knowing, the body has an intelligence, and if we begin to move and if we begin to touch it, we can help it um, find its integrity back. But that in the process, it reveals deep psychological events. So memories would come up. Um, I didn't know then about developmental movement. New movements would come up. It's like all of this would be happening very organically and without having that psychological top-down analysis capacity yet at that point. And so I thought, well, with all this psychological piece, I wanted to go back to school. I thought I need to know more about psychology. And I found Pacifica in Santa Barbara Graduate Institute, and Pacifica is still there and it's very wonderful, and did a master's degree at Pacifica. And what brought me to Pacifica is I had read that they were inviting artists to come and do their work because their motto was tending to the soul of the world. And so then I began at Pacifica taking early pictures of myself and then sort of pairing them with paintings. And this was actually, and that's about, I won't share very much more about the art process, but what I started to see, this is me as a baby. And this photo was taken by my grandfather. And when I painted this painting, I saw this picture, I thought, "Oh my God, there are resources in my life that can help me heal." And so this was actually a project I did at Pacifica because they invited the art, they invited some very, they weren't requiring written papers. They were saying, give us something that brings your process forward. So then I wrote, very young, you sat me against a tree. And that was really just that was like, oh, there's the healing, but also there's the midline. And so in neuroaffective touch, we work very much with midline, which is that sense of core organization that brings us back to our center from the disorganized pieces where we lose our center. Branches drawing in the light from heaven, roots pulling up the richness of the earth, and at their meeting place, my young body. And so it brought me to really connect with spirit and earth and how we bring that together. So just a few, and then of course things continue to evolve. As you can see, I got really interested in trees and ended up painting forests, so to speak. And it led me to this internal and that really becoming really aware of interoception and that sense of the journey inward and how the journey inward actually opens a door to awareness. And this is the last painting I did. I showed you the very first one and this one, and after that I really switched over, did a doctorate in psychology, spent 8 years in a psychoanalytic institute, really exploring the psychological aspects as well as the body, the body, the sensory part of it. And so that's how neuroaffective touch came together. Neuro for the nervous system, affective for the emotional system, really bring in psychology and sensory and body together. And somehow in that, the importance of touch, I keep doing this, the importance of touch in bringing these two together. So I'm going to stop sharing for now. Um, so what I want to do now is talk about the basic principles of neuroaffective touch. And there are many, but I picked six, and I hope I'll have time to share them with you. But six principles of neuroaffective touch so that you can get some of the theory of it, and then we'll go to questions. So, you know, when I started seeing, at least for me and the process, looking for, I was looking for a therapist who would work with me with that sense of bringing mind and body together that I had become so aware of in my own process. And I would go to the psychologist. I thought I will find a Jungian analyst. They have a lot to do with the imagery, or and I found I could not find a therapist who could work with me with a true integration of mind and body. So the psychotherapists would say, well, I don't know anything about the body. Let's put these paintings aside and let's really get into your process. And then I would go to body workers, which was wonderful, but there was no processing. So um, in my own sort of journey, so to speak, I was like, well, if I cannot, and there might have been, but I didn't find, if I cannot find someone who can bring these together as they already are in my process, what do I do, right? And at about that time, well, I enrolled in Pacifica for sure, but also this was the late 70s, early 80s. The term somatic psychology was starting to come forth. And I discovered that there was a field, a fledgling field of healing that was doing mind and body, that had its beginnings in Wilhelm Reich, and that was actually in development. So very early on, I thought that is the place where I belong. That is the place where I will develop my work. And so neuroaffective touch is very much in the lineage of somatic psychology. And the term somatics now is really gaining traction, this body mind working with trauma. At the time, Peter Levine was just starting his work in Berkeley, which was, with trauma, which I think Peter's work has been a gift to the world in a way, in that through trauma, he's been able to introduce the body, the importance of the body, the importance of regulating the nervous system. And actually, one little fact that I think is wonderful is that there are over 50,000 somatic experiencing practitioners in the world, which is truly amazing, right? And often people will ask me, well, how is it different from, how does what you do it different from somatic experiencing? And truly, it's building on somatic experiencing, that in the beginning, and it has changed a bit now, but in the beginning it was really about shock trauma. And Peter is very dear to me, and we've had many talks. But so it was about shock trauma, and it makes sense because that was the most obvious, and so many people, there's so much trauma in the world. But what he developed is a principle of titration, a principle of pendulation, the principles of slowing down. He really made that clear. And that is also part of neuroaffective touch. But where I found myself going because of my process was in the developmental arena more than in the shock arena. And so with the shock trauma, there is such a high energetic charge that it is very much about resourcing and slowing down. What I found going into the developmental piece is that it is about slowing down, but I thought, how how do we how are we with babies? You know, it's different being with shock trauma and being with a baby. And so what I started to feel is we hold the babies. We attune to the babies. And it's a slow process, it's a relational process, and it's an emotional process. So the thought is, well, I'm not working with shock trauma so much anymore as working with the emotional and relational misattunements that put our bodies into some sort of freeze or shock. So it was really simply expanding from my own process and from being a woman and tending to babies, um, this work with trauma. So, really, from today's perspective, even though there's still a lot of taboo around working with trauma, and I get a lot of questions about that, well, what about, is it illegal? Is it dangerous? Do I dare? Will I lose my license? But really, from the perspective of developmental psychology and from the perspective of somatic science, um, it's very clear that touch is not optional, that it's really essential to really bring our whole self together. That when positive attuned touch is missing in a child, due to misattunements, to neglect, to abuse, there's so many ways in which we miss or are wounded relationally and emotionally. The absence of touch leaves a gap in our development. We don't know how to bond. We don't know what it feels like to yield into trust, to yield into, and that shows up a lot in relationships, like not knowing how to yield into a partner to feel that sense of attachment and bonding. So, having done that as a sort of introduction, the first principle for neuroaffective touch is that touch is our first language. That before we can speak or even open our eyes, we are held, we're touched, and that not only is it our first language, but it's the first sense for us that develops in us. Touch come in the development in the womb. Touch is the first sense to come online, and it comes online at week 6 of development. So we're still like about an inch long, and already our bodies, our cells are registering what is happening to us in the womb. There's no brain yet, there's no nervous system, there's simply an organization of cells that are already taking in that we're floating in an amniotic fluid, that we're having to merge in the wall of the uterus so that we embed ourselves into life, that we feel the rhythmic movement of the mother's breath. And all of these are touch connections. And what became very clear is that working with touch, we do a lot of nurturing, supporting, holding. It doesn't take very long that the body begins to tell the story from its very beginning, and that its beginning is not at birth, its beginning is at conception. And there's a whole field now emerging, I'm sure you must be aware of it, of pre and perinatal work. And so this is where we start in neuroaffective touch, is with that yielding receptive process that allows us to repair even traumas that have been in the womb and even transgenerational traumas that are passed through in the DNA and in the cellular structures. Um, so, principle number 2, Our skin and brain originate from the same embryonic tissue. And this is really important in terms of touch because what happens developmentally is that those sensors that are there from the beginning are in the surface, in the skin, and that the nervous system develops from the skin inward to the brain. We often think that it's the opposite. Brain developed and then came the rest, but it's actually the other way around. The nervous system pathways start at the surface in the skin, in the surface of the developing embryo, and work their way. And they have, seen, they have movies of the neural pathways building from the skin inward, so that our neural organization started at the skin and how the skin received the messages of the environment. It's one aspect of the sensory system. So that's why, and I think that's probably why there is a taboo on touch, is that it so very quickly goes to the core of self, you know. And so particular types of skin contact have immediate and very powerful effects on our mood and our sense of self. Um, so that we have to pair that internal experience with then the meaning making. So I'm going to pause here with these first two principles, and I just want to share with you some some of the aspects of touch that come from that sense of what happens in our environment, and how touch actually starts to inform us about what kind of world we're coming into. So is my okay, I just
Yeah.
always need to check. All right, so I did it. These are images that are a lot with animals because it's so clear what is going on with the animals. And so I'm going to invite you just to look at these images and take them in. And so what you see here in these little ones is how they are yielding, how they feel so safe to rest and let go in the being held. And that really, if we put ourselves as little babies in those places, already we start to feel in our bodies either what didn't happen to us or how it feels when we're really held in a safe, stable way. And that starts to tie in with this whole piece of safety. And here are these little, notice the arms and little hands. The term attachment, which we use in bonding and development, actually initially got its name from the fact that when we are born, we know how to hold on, and that the letting go is a process that comes later that you see in children. But it's so that when a mother in nature, let's say, has to run from a predator, the baby will hold on, attachment, and cannot let go. There are no processes for letting go because the mother cannot tend to holding the baby while she's running away from a predator. So this piece of we learn to yield and we learn to receive through yielding, but we also are born holding on and have to learn to let go. And so the touch can be very helpful in working with the heart, the processes in terms of allowing us to let go. Oftentimes we don't know the degree to which we are holding on because we are afraid that there is danger out in the world. Trust and bonding is expressed very much through that sense of coming into contact, and that these, I'll say caregivers because, and when I use the term mother, it really is intended to be a caregiver. It's not so much gender um, attached, gender connected as it is with the function of. And so part of the function of mothering, no matter what the sex of the person is that sense of holding, of enveloping, of containing, and of being attentive. How there's a sense of protection and and of protection and connection and attunement in these mothers, and that also translates in our touch, so that as we develop as practitioners who touch, these are all aspects of ourselves that we develop in order to be able to offer a touch that will be healing to our clients. Protect and safety, that sense that for a young child, that sense of the containment and of a buffer between the world and that very vulnerable, tender little inner self that's developing. Comfort and care, that sometimes when we feel really lost, we feel really alone, we do need to lean into someone who can hold that sense of lostness to bring connection. That, in a way, touch, one of the most healing aspects of touch is bringing connection that is supportive, containing, and that touch then evolves into our ability to connect as adults. And there is a developmental arc that starts with those very early yielding, containment, feeling safe, that over the years develop into at the way in which as adults we know how to attach, we know how to feel, and also brings in our mature sexuality. That the arc of development of touch starts in that yielding into that parental safety, and actually, I keep doing this, but ends up in our capacity to bond sexually. And a lot of the what we're finding is that a lot of sexual issues are really start in that early lack of touch, neglect or abuse in touch, that then has not allowed the receptors in the body to develop in the ability to receive from a place of feeling trusting and safe. So touch expresses connection, protection, care, attachment, and a safety within the relational matrix. This couple were our neighbors, and little Nico here is just 3 weeks old, and I and you can see how the baby rests into the mothering function, and then there's the father in a way offering yet another layer of containment, so that as we learn to touch, we also learn to bring forth what were the layers of containment that allowed for that nascent little nervous system that is still in us to learn to trust, to learn to drop, that there are times when we don't have to be vigilant 100% of the time. So I'm going to stop my share. Um, how are we doing, Jen?
Yeah, I think we're doing good, Aileen. We had some of the questions that came in ahead of time. Did you want to go over more of those now or open it up or?
No, hopefully I'm speaking to, I did read all the questions that everybody sent in. Hopefully I'm speaking to it enough, and if I didn't, I'll just take another 10 minutes or so.
Oh, yeah, if you have, yeah, absolutely. Please continue. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I
Yeah.
think we're good. So, principle number three, touch can bring repair when development goes awry. Many of us, especially if we experience emotional trauma or relational trauma, often referred to as CPTSD, complex complex trauma, have developmental deficits. We all do, and just like I saw it emerge in my paintings, in some way, there's no shame to it, there's no problem, but it's painful, and we need to have ways to help. So these are not they're not develop emotional relational traumas are not merely psychological blind spots that we can fix through insight, but they're breaches in our natural developmental sequence, in our ability to yield, in our ability to take in our ability to push back, in our ability to reach. It actually goes into the movements that our body learns through development, but or does not learn through development. If we lived in if we grew up in families that were in some way abusive, dysfunctional, there was a lot of fighting, yelling, what we learn is to somehow close off, either through physical muscular bracing as a protection, especially with physical abuse or breaches, or energetically, we begin to, in the breath, in the cell, to close off and pull away in order to protect ourselves. And so we lose our capacity to breathe deeply. We lose our capacity to move freely in the world. And what happens is that these breaches that are emotional, relational, and physical and energetic um, feel like a disconnection, dissociation, emptiness, internal chaos. The sense, if it's very early, there'll be a sense of falling in the void. The void actually somatically is a really important concept because when a baby is not held, there's a sense, and you bring the attention to an adult's body and ask, how how would it feel to, how does it feel? And often there'll be this sense that if I let go, I'll fall in the void. I will, there'll be no holding. I'll be in the dark. I'll be so imagery that has that void, that emptiness is definitely, very clearly, an imagery that says there was no holding, and we need to reach in and give that physical holding. Touch restores our implicit relational knowing. Infants know when they're wanted, when someone looks at them lovingly or in a cold, angry way or in an absent way, when an embrace is safe, when it's threatening, when a touch elicits an opening consent or a sense of repulsion. So all of that is like touch is very, very connected to our interoception, to that dorsal vagal system. In other words, to the organs in the body, to what now we know is the polyvagal system in its dorsal organization. So that implicit knowing, what has been discovered is that there are sensors in the skin that actually go directly into the organs. They're called CT afferents, and that they actually stimulate our emotional selves directly. There are other sensors that go to the brain that tell us about our environment, and then there are sensors that trigger a whole internal interoceptive event. So when we talk about interoception, the touch can allow us to initiate a direct conversation with interoception, which is actually absolutely incredible. And then, of course, what we know is The Body Remembers. The Body Remembers is a title of Babette Rothschild's book, one of the very first somatic books ever to be published. Again, that was in the early 70s, 80s. The Body Remembers. Oftentimes, a lot of the information that we a lot of the experience we have stays within the realm of the body and is not sent up to the brain for processing. So when we go with touch, we actually discover a lot of secrets or a lot of sensory experiences that had never had any words. And people will say that, I am, there's a lot going on, but I have no words. And an important piece of neuroaffective touch is that we stay with the wordless state long enough for it to become an emotion and long enough for the mind to begin to find the words that actually describe or fit the sensation. And that is the process of awareness and consciousness. And that is actually, for those of you who are familiar with focusing, with Eugene Gendlin's work in unfocusing, touch really supports the work of focusing because we can then, with our touch, help the body send signals to the brain long enough that the brain, with the help of us, as therapists, can find the language for it so that we can fully develop the narrative of what happened to us. So that is really as many principles as I'm going to share. But I also want to do one very last thing is give you a little bit of a sense of how we teach. But as a closure to these principles, I'll say that the way that the foundation training is organized, shall we say, is that we work a lot with the early forms of touch, that sense of which I call nurturing touch, because that is at the foundation of all of the later touches. We have, deep tissue and massage, and there are a lot of different modalities of touch. But to me, those modalities then develop as we become older, as we develop in our own arc, but it starts in the nurturing touch and the intention that we bring to the touch. So really what we all need to develop that sense of self is we need to feel seen and met and understood. We need to be recognized, to be attuned to, and we need to know that we exist in the mind and heart of the other. And there's no better way than feeling someone's caring touch to really anchor, to really ground our relationships. We need to feel valued, appreciated, respected, and confident expressing our needs and wants. Right. So, in terms of how I structure the training, is that the very first layer of touch is how we're held. And how we are held allows us to rest into, to yield into a caregiver. And when we can truly yield into the caregiver, then the social engagement can begin. So we start working a lot with um, did I put it here? Ah, we start working a lot with the sympathetic nervous system, which is along the back. And notice how when we hold a baby, how this particular dad with a little Nico, this is still little Nico baby, how this dad is actually giving this amazing support along the back. And that the along the back, if you look here, the sympathetic nervous system runs in the spine. So we start with the sympathetic nervous system supporting the back so that there's a sense of yielding that opens up the capacity to receive. And so you'll see the whole training is structured in this way of looking at the anatomy, looking how we then can be with the anatomy and the intelligence of the body and how it has organized itself, and then work from there on the emotional relational piece that is also built into being attuned to those aspects of our anatomy. Okay, so just to end, this was actually a sequence of starting, you know, being supported, feeling that sense of the missing pieces coming in, and ending up very much in a strong midline. And that brings us back to this work, which is really in the physical anatomy that has its correlate in the emotional physical. Okay.
That was wonderful, Aileen. Every time I sit with you, I learn something new and appreciate it anew. So thank you for that.
All right.
We do have about a half hour for questions, answers, and even if there's a comment or two. Um, I see Cindy asked, do you teach ways to integrate with IFS and also EMDR?
Right. Yes. Absolutely. The piece about neuroaffective touch is that it's not a therapy. These are tools that you can incorporate in all of the different modalities. And with IFS, internal family systems, and also voice dialogue, which is less well known, but I do a lot of mind-body dialogue. Is this coming from, is this a story the body is telling? Is this a belief system that's in the mind? Let's have them talk together. We do a lot of dialogues between body parts, between mind and body, between the energetic and the physical. So the approach of IFS is very much, already gives you an in into these types of body mind. In terms of EMDR, the movements are really important, but also we do a lot of touch around the musculature of the eyes. It's very delicate touch work, but when there's a lot of trauma, there's like a freeze response that happens in the eyes because the eyes begin to track the source of the danger. And oftentimes in our adult vision, there's still a vigilance in the eye muscles that is tracking for danger. And so we work very, very gently around the eye and into the whole visual system to help release the vigilance.
I hope that answers your question, Cindy. You don't have to necessarily come on video, but
Yeah.
yeah, great. I know one of the questions we got ahead of time had to do with insurance, and so I thought I would just put in the link for the insurance for NA Touch so that people can see that there is a kind of a bodywork insurance that we're that covers this work, because I know, especially for therapists, it doesn't seem to be, covered under that part of what they do.
Mhm.
So I'm just putting that in the chat for everyone to see in case that's of interest or
Yeah.
a question.
Yeah, let me add something to that.
Yeah.
Is that this is a big issue, and at the USABP, if you don't know about the United States Association for Body Psychotherapy, USABP, it is the national organization for everyone doing somatic work, including touch. We have been trying, I say we because I'm president of the organization right now, and I found that it's really important to get to have insurance available that includes the touch, the somatic, and the psychological. And approaching different insurance companies, it's been very interesting how they just don't understand. The minute they hear working with the body, they hear naked person on a massage table. And it's been a journey trying to educate insurance companies to develop insurance programs that would be truly integrational. It's in process. In the meantime, and it might be a few years before it happens, but it's in process. And in the meantime, um, most of us who work with touch have two insurances. Of course, our psychological insurance, malpractice insurance, and then I have an insurance with the American Massage Association, AMA. So, and insurance is not expensive. So it's like $200 a year or something. So it's possible to do both. There is a company called, what is it? Hands On? That,
Yeah, I put that link in there. So,
yeah, right.
hands-on trade. Yeah.
Yeah, hands-on trade actually covers alternative practitioners, and they do cover us neuroaffective touch.
Great. We've got a couple other questions as well, Aileen, that have just come in. One person who was wondering about the hybrid training format. So we have the hybrid training, which combines some online weekends and an in-person touch immersion. And then there's also the fully in-person training. So this person was wondering if the material is taught in the hybrid program in a way that can be adapted to the in-person touch practice, even though the practices for that part are online.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, we started the online training during COVID. That COVID hit in the middle of an in-person training, and all of a sudden we couldn't finish the training because and we happened to be in Oslo at the time, and they said anyone who is not Norwegian, who has not been in the country more than 2 years, cannot be in contact with anyone Norwegian. So then we started broadcasting from a hotel, and I thought, this is the end of it all. It's like, how can we teach touch online? But as it turns out, we can, and we have continued because a lot of people cannot travel for the in-person, or they can travel once but not. So then so then now we have two programs. They both teach the same things. In the online program, we front load the theory and the self-directed touch and how to work online in the online weekends. There are three days online weekends. And then we do a touch intensive because it's not possible to learn the touch unless we actually have some in-person exchange. And so we do a touch intensive that is 5 days, that is held here in my home in Los Angeles. We actually can usually have about 30 students, 15 massage tables, and people sometimes are afraid, even in person, are afraid to come to Los Angeles, but it's a part of the city that's very safe, very green, very retreat-like. And so we do the in-person here. I prefer to do that rather than in hotels because we keep a much more healing vibe, so to speak. So anyway, it's the same material. Online, we front load the theory and then have an intensive. Some people like that because then they've got all the theory and then they can just relax into being with the body. Or we do two 6-day in-person trainings here again, where we do the theory and then do the touch practice and theory and touch practice so that they we alternate between them.
Can I add
Uh,
something about
yeah,
the a hybrid just because I took it last year, Aileen? You did demos with online sessions. So there's a way to do NA Touch online with people where I don't know if I'm going to say this exactly right, but you tell the client, I'm imagining I'm putting my hand, like I'd like to put my hand here to support you. And there's something about the intention that is communicated or conveyed even across time and space, I want to say. And so it's different than if someone is on the table, but
right.
based on those demo sessions, I was amazed at how much can happen just in the online setting. Plus, we were learning all the self-directed touch and the anatomy and the contemplations for our own practice and use. So I thought for me, it set me up very well for the immersion.
That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
Sarita, am I saying your name right? Is it okay
Hi,
if we spotlight you for your
of
question?
course.
Great.
I don't really know what that means, but
That means your
um,
image gets really big.
hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for hosting this, Aileen. We've exchanged a couple back and forths. I was referred to by Trina Altman,
Oh, yes.
and I'm so excited to be here and seeing you, and it's all so much more exciting than I could have even imagined. I'm And just quickly before I ask my question, it's interesting because I have my 15-year-old tiny dog next to me, and she's really 15 years ago when I rescued her. She's when I started to get hits on.
Ah,
I've never let anyone close to me. This is a long time ago, this stuff, and she cracked me open like an egg. Her touch, when you showed those pictures, I was like, and so I've had 15 years with her. Still going, but I just loved you having those animal pictures. That really resonated with me. So I'm starting my master's in clinical psychology at Antioch this January.
mm-hmm.
But I'm very, very interested in the specific realm that you work in. Um, would you, would this be the kind of thing, do I need to graduate in order to do these classes, or is this something I could take alongside and start incorporating with how I see my future
Yeah.
and what I'm interested in?
Yeah. Yes, you could do that. You don't need a master's. What I do ask is that someone has a some kind of professional background working with people because that is important because we do a lot of practice, dyad practice, touching and all that. But it incorporates really well. Antioch does have a fledgling somatic program with I'm trying to think of his name, Rick, as the head. Rick actually has done the neuroaffective touch training.
Okay.
So there is familiarity. Some other parts in Antioch, I've heard people say that some teachers still say don't touch clients, but I just say we are pioneers and we have to start somewhere and we can't listen to those messages. But, be aware and cognizant and respectful. But yes, you can do both at once.
Okay, great. Thank you. I live in Venice, so I would be excited about the in-person.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to meet you, and thank you for putting this on.
you're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
I do have written down here next on my thing some of the questions. Hold on, that have been asked. So if we don't have, I can go to those.
I
Or you
think
have them too, I think,
I do,
Jen.
yeah. I think there was one follow-up question um, on the format of the hybrid modules. They said they are specifically wondering if the online weekends teach touch adapted work or if the material is not adapted to physical touch until the in-person.
We do a lot of the self-directed touch. A lot of people since COVID have not gone back to working in person. They and work online. And I know a lot of therapists who even, I have not gone back to having an office because they found it so helpful, So the online definitely is about does include um, and is helpful for people who work online only, with a little bit of the self-touch like we did in the beginning, and the anatomy and explanation and how to recognize, because when you're online, what you see is a person's expression and their gestures, and how to recognize or slow down or bring attention to a gesture will begin to feed back into the body. So there's a lot of somatic work incorporated in learning touch, and that is very doable online. And people and I also do live demonstrations of sessions online so that you can see how you can work with touch online. Before we go to another question, I want to make sure I introduce Michelle. Oops, she just, okay, when she comes back, Jen, I want to make sure we introduce Michelle.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so let me see. We've had a couple other questions.
Sorry,
Andrew,
I was coughing, so everyone else.
well, let's
Okay.
introduce you now.
Yes.
Yeah. Aileen, do you want to?
Yeah, so Michelle is our admissions person. So she is your first contact when you apply. I just wanted everybody to meet her, and she usually can answer most of the questions, and if not, then she'll consult with me, and I will answer them, or we'll do it together. And is there anything you wanted to add, Michelle? Maybe you have some questions that come to you when people first apply.
Thank you so much, Aileen. And I'm excited. I'm going to be doing the hybrid program starting in January, so I'm excited to go through it with many of you that are choosing to do the program. Just want to just mention that we are the hybrid program. The online module starts January 18th. So if you're interested, certainly get your application in now. And there's plenty of time that we can work together to make that happen. So if you're interested in the hybrid model, by all means, start the application process now. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I think that some of the questions that I get from students, Aileen, are maybe more logistical.
Mm-hmm.
So students, first of all, wondering, um, and that we have such an incredible, particularly in this session, we have such an incredible group of people and people that come to neuroaffective touch with a great, breadth and variety of background. But there's some students that wonder, if they'll fit, if they'll fit in or if they're qualified to apply. So I thought maybe you could just share, some of what the variety of and how people take this training and how they use it and what, backgrounds it's a great fit for.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sure. Let's see. Well, there's so many ways. There are people who come from a psychotherapy background who have never touched, and there are people who come from the body work, body-centered background who want to learn about the psychological aspects, and really whether and then we have coaches, nurses, all kinds of folks who want to learn the touch, but want to learn the integration. And whatever background you come from, there's something to be learned. For example, for the psychotherapist, perhaps they will never be as accomplished in the touch as a body worker, for example. But the touch that we teach is a very gentle, attuned touch. And what psychotherapists have is the attunement and the understanding of how to bring in languaging, although with using touch, somatic languaging is a little different than the kind of languaging one uses psychotherapeutically. So there's a learning of the languaging and of course that transition of touch. Body workers, I have trained in many types of body work, and always it's been about, except for a few, I don't want to make it totally general, but it's a lot about doing to the body. I'm going to help your muscle relax. I'm going to build this strength. And and the difference, and it's a huge difference as body workers tell me that not doing to the body, but being with the body in an invitational way and receiving what the body has to tell is a very different direction. We're not going into the body, we're inviting the body to come forth. And of course, what body workers don't have is the languaging to then interface with the story that emerges. So that's also, so everybody has a piece that 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 can be tweaked to be more somatic, but that also brings in that integration.
Thank you. Something else that I find fascinating about this program, and I don't think we've said it in this session, but as part of your training journey, aside from the online modules and the in-person intensive, to receive your for your foundational training, students are required to do a certain number of personal sessions
Yeah.
to have as the client to have that experience. So I just also find this program so unique in that it's also personal development for yourself, not
Yeah.
just another skill to use in your profession, but I think it helps you embody the practices, and it really I think is much of a personal development journey as it is a professional training. So I wanted to just share with that. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Question came.
Let me
Oh,
just add a
please.
little that, yeah, because a lot of folks come into the training with their therapist hat on. We're going to learn a technique. But really, what very quickly happens within the first or second day is like, oh, my own body has never been held in these ways. My own body has never been touched in this way. And so it does elicit a really beautiful emerging group field where all of a sudden the body is invited and starts to come forth. And in that sense, people say this is a training that for many can be quite life-changing.
Well, it's they when they like say that when you're learning to cook something that you have to taste everything that you've made because you have to be able to experience it. I come from a culinary education background, so I always have some kind of a food analogy, but similar to how a chef needs to taste the food to know what it's like,
Oh,
going out.
lovely.
Yes. Um, a kind of follow-up question, Eileen, and maybe you kind of covered this a little bit already, but someone's asking, how they can incorporate what new language skills, vocabulary would NA Touch give them to with their current practice of cranial sacral and massage therapy. Um, so I don't know if you want to, speak to that. What is the extra, kind of, benefit?
Mhm. Um, well, how I would answer that right now is that sensation is a language that doesn't have words. And oftentimes, mind has a language that is disconnected from sensation, and that bringing them together, finding, and when you look at when you think about a baby, a mother is always talking to her baby. She has this little dial. Are you cold? How are you doing? You're so beautiful. I love you so much. Are you hungry? There's a dialogue that a mother has with the baby. But some mothers are stressed or never learned that dialogue. So a lot of people have never learned to put their internal sensory experience into an actual language, because what the mother is doing when she's doing that, she's teaching that baby to grow up with having words for their internal experience. So the languaging, the somatic languaging, has a particular flavor that it's rooted in sensory experience. And the body then, when it knows that the mind is paying attention, will start to clarify its sensation to help the mind find exactly the right word that matches, that fits the sensory. And as therapists, when somebody doesn't have languaging, we then take on that role of suggesting, would it be this? Is it a tightness that has like some fear? It's like we begin to offer languaging to those areas that were never given language. And then when a person sort of fits the word with the sensation, there's this kind of aha. It's like, now I can talk about what's going on with me. And it's very exciting for body and for mind to learn how to decode each other's worlds.
Thank you.
And that questioner added something else, which is they're trained in Hakomi as well. I don't know if that's,
Mhm,
I'm not familiar with Hakomi, but
mhm.
I think probably what you've said applies, Aileen. But if there's anything else to add about Hakomi and any touch or
I know of Hakomi and did some Hakomi training a long time ago, but things change. I
yeah.
do know that a number of students from, trained in Hakomi have taken any touch and found that somehow it completed the training. The same thing with Kathy's training or Dave Berger's or, Abby. A lot of people, there are a number of trainings out there. And the feedback I get is that there's a particular way, which I don't know that I'd be able to explain, that it brings it all together. That's one of the feedbacks I get a lot. It's like it brought it all together. Or else some people say it was the missing piece. Or,
I heard some
so.
assistants say, just kind of spontaneously during our training last year, that any touch became the organizing principle for how they approached client treatments. Like, because any touch met such deep unmet needs for the clients this therapist or this, body-centered practitioner was working with, any touch allowed them to really bring it all together in their clinical approach, and then the clients then were receiving something kind of more integrative. That's just something I had heard. And I'm not a clinician, so I can't say that that's my personal experience, just because I don't do that one-on-one with folks.
As Aileen said earlier, the term somatic has really become a part of the cultural zeitgeist, and it's really everywhere. And I think with that, there are a million different types of trainings and workshops. And I think that in this field, there's no one way to build your toolkit. And I think it's a matter of what you're drawn to and, for some people, yes, this will be the missing link. This will then, be the underpinnings of how they practice. But I think it's a lot of it comes down to if you connect with this and if this feels right for you, and just do your due diligence with other types of trainings. If something is almost seems too good to be true, it might be. But I think that look at the value of what you're getting and the value that it'll bring to you and to your practice. And I think that's why, I mentioned, the personal sessions earlier, that this program is structured in a way that it is of the highest of integrity, and is not, a quick certificate to put on your wall. If you're looking for a quick certificate to put on your wall, this ain't it. To speak to the quality of it. So, that's kind of my experience. And yes, some people are agreeing in the comments. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're
I
just
wanted
about at time. Oh, go ahead, Aileen. Yeah.
just one more thing is that we require for the foundation training 6 personal sessions and also some consultations. We have consultation providers. You can get individual consultations or small group consultation, or what we call mentored hands-on consultation, even online, where you set up your table with a client and begin to do the work, and somebody is watching and working with you. So for those folks who actually want more follow through, these consultations and small groups, some are ongoing. There's a lot of follow through once the foundation training is over.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are at technically the close of the 90-minute open house, and I just wanted to pop in the training calendar link in our chat window so everyone can see the different training options next year. From that page, you can also access the application if you feel you would like to apply for any of the trainings next year. There will be an in-person training in Los Angeles and also in London and in India, and the online international hybrid.
Right. But one more thing, somebody had asked if they were an international student or in another country. The hybrid usually will have people from all different countries, and so yes, yes to international. If you are in Europe, there's an in-person training in London through the SOCI, but that's also on the website. Yeah.
Yeah.
And for the first time, we will be going to India. So if you're in the Pacific Rim or in Australia or in that part of the world, we will have an in-person training in India.
Super exciting. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who was able to attend in person, or if you're catching the recording, thank you for being part of such a rich Q&A and introduction today to NA Touch. Thank you, Aileen. Please keep an eye on your inbox for a follow-up email from us that will have the recording later this coming week. And if anyone does have a burning question for Aileen, we'll stay on a few minutes after, so you're welcome to stay on. For everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. We absolutely appreciate your interest and dedication to this deep healing work. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye,
And
everyone.